This is Ethan, and I'm here with Dave, and together we are Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast, episode 114-inch.
On this week's episode, part one of our interview with special effects legend Kevin Yagher, the man behind such icons as the Chucky doll, the Crypt Keeper, and Weird Al's fat costume.
It's Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
It's a podcast about Weird Al.
It's Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
Seriously, the whole podcast is about Weird Al.
Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
You don't have to listen, but we're glad you are.
Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
Mahalo to Jim Kimo West for that incredible, pretty stinking majestic, amazingly amazing theme song. And boy, Dave, I am so excited to be back for another episode of Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
Me too, and welcome back, Ethan. I hope you had a festive weasel stomping day, a happy Canada Day, a relaxing Independence Day, and a pretty stinking majestic National Air Traffic Control Day.
Well, thank you, Dave. You too. I always get excited about National Air Traffic Control Day. It reminds me of my friend Amy.
Oh, your friend Amy, the airline flight attendant?
No, Amy, the architect. Architect Amy.
Okay. Anyway, we hope everyone enjoyed our two-part interview with Jim Kimo West, and we wanted to remind you to pick up his brand new album, Kahanua Maluhia, Peaceful World, over at jimkimowest.com if you have not already.
All right, it's time for us to check out This Week in Burrito Ads.
This week's episode is brought to you in part by vegan burrito restaurant Burrito in Troy, New York, home of the 2-pound double wrapped in a quesadilla Burrito, and Wizard Burger in Albany, New York. Come on down to Burrito and Burrito your Burrito, or hop on over to Wizard Burger for mouth-watering, loaded, dare I say, beefy vegan burgers. From Troy to Albany to Uranus, Burrito and Wizard Burger feed the hungry with out-of-this-world, plant-based, real food, always vegan style. Visit burritosquare.com or wizardburger.com and order ahead.
All right, now it's time to check out This Week in Weird Al-related news. So, Dave, you know I am a major fan of The Howard Stern Show.
Oh, yeah, of course. You've been on The Howard Stern Show before.
Well, that's true, but I'm also a huge fan. So I was listening last week to the show, and I tuned in right as Howard was talking about unintelligible song lyrics. And so I'm listening to him play some of these clips and, some from mumble rappers, all this stuff. And the whole time, I just couldn't stop thinking about Smells Like Nirvana. So, of course, the last song he plays a clip from was Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit. And I was so excited. I'm like, oh, I hope he's going to play Weird Al's version. And of course, Howard went on to say Weird Al was a genius for writing Smells Like Nirvana. And then he even played a clip of the song and talked about how much he loved the video. So it's always awesome when one of my heroes appreciates one of my other heroes.
That's so awesome that Howard is such a big fan of Smells Like Nirvana. Wow, I always knew there was something about Howard that I really liked.
Well, there's a lot of stuff I like, but I'm glad that you found one thing, Dave.
Yeah, well, there's more than one thing, but the fact that Howard's a Weird Al fan, that's always positive.
That's the greatest you can be.
Well, there are some exciting updates happening over in our official Facebook group over at group.2000inch.com. Patreon supporter and our good friend Mike Minnick, he posted a picture of a custom travel mug that he made with our logo on it. It is so cool. You've got to check that out if you have not seen that yet, Ethan.
I love it, and I really hope Mike still has my address.
Hint, Mike. Hint. And our friend Helen Ketchum, she posted a clip of Weird Al performing with Sparks that she found after seeing the Sparks Brothers documentary.
Oh, man, I loved watching that video. I mean, it's really cool just to see Sparks performing, but then to see Al surprise the audience and come out playing accordion, it was really cool. So I highly recommend that clip.
Yeah, that was totally awesome. And Ethan, did you see that amazing picture that our friend UH Jeff posted of his cat Maya in front of an official Gil and Chillo? How awesome was that picture?
That was the most awesome, most cutest thing I've seen in a very, very long time, Dave.
And Ethan, you posted some information about a very cool Monopoly game that you found. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I definitely urge people to head over to group.2000inch.com to check out all the pictures and the information I posted. But just as an overview, I found online someone selling a custom Weird Al Opoly. So there was these kits back in the day where you could create your own Opoly. That's what they called it. And I don't know the origin of it. I bought it from a woman who bought it from a craft fair, so she's not sure who exactly made it, but someone put a lot of time and effort and a lot of heart into making this really cool Weird Al themed Monopoly board. And there's really funny, chance cards, and there's, every single, street is named after a Weird Al song. It's a very cool, one of a kind thing, and I just love it. So I think our audience will get a kick out of it if you head over and check those images out.
Yeah, there's some really cool stuff. Have you tried playing it yet, Ethan?
I have not. No, I need to convince someone. I have a hard enough time convincing people to play regular Monopoly with me, so it's gonna be tough. Maybe next time I see you, Dave, we can play.
All right, I'll get my tiny top hat figurine polished up, ready to go.
That sound means we have an official message on the official 347 Spatula Hotline, the official hotline of Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast. Let's take an official listen.
Hey guys, Jake Larson here. Love the sound that Chemo made when he was talking about being nervous while operating his wah pedal. So I thought it would make a nice ringtone. So I emailed it to Frank. Enjoy.
Oh boy. Okay, Frank. I can't wait to hear this ringtone that Jake put together.
All right, Frank, cue up that ringtone. I'm really curious to hear this.
Jake, I love that.
That is hysterical. That is awesome.
No good sound clip goes unappreciated on Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast. Thanks for making that, Jake. And I kind of want that to be my new ringtone.
I think I'm going to make that my new ringtone. That is pretty funny. Thank you very much, Jake. That was amazing. Thanks for sharing that with Frank and us and our listeners.
Hey, Dave, do you know how to read?
Of course I know how to read. Do you know how to read, Ethan?
What kind of question is that, Dave?
It's the same exact question that you asked me.
Oh, well, right. Anyway, I got to tell you about this book I just got for free with my Amazon Prime subscription.
No way! Yeah, tell me more, please.
So I decided, hey, why not type Sebastian Shepard, my favorite pseudonymic author, into Amazon?
Right. I do that quite often as well.
And while I already own the paperback version of his book, The Ruins of Our Past,
as we all do, yes,
I don't have the Kindle version nor the audiobook version.
Oh, you need those to complete your collection.
Well, now I can, because with Amazon Prime, I can get the Kindle version for free with Kindle Unlimited, and I can get the audiobook for free with an Audible trial.
No way. What a great deal. You cannot beat free.
Well, you can beat free. You could get paid for something.
Oh, you mean like the ad we're doing right now?
Correctamundo!
Well, thank you, David Grant, a.k.a. Sebastian Shepard, author of The Ruins of Our Past, available on Amazon.
And visit wolfandwool.com, don't you forget.
I never forget to visit wolfandwool.com.
All right, Dave, I'm excited. Let's get to this week's interview.
Our next guest is a creature and makeup effects designer, known not only for Freddy Krueger's makeup and the Crypt Keeper, but he's also the designer of the Chucky doll, and he worked on the Bill and Ted movies and the movie Face Off, and recently he did makeup on the television series Bones, among countless others. But Weird Al fans will also recognize his work on the iconic Fat costume. So it's our great pleasure to welcome Kevin Yagher to the podcast. How are you doing, Kevin? Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, you guys. This is great. I love to talk about Al and stuff. He's a great guy, so thanks for having me on.
I think anytime someone thinks of a Weird Al music video, the first thing they think of is the Fat music video. It is just so iconic, and it's so incredible, the inflating face and the costume. And tell us how you got involved with working with Weird Al.
Well, I met Al on a TV show years ago. It was Amazing Stories back in the, I guess we're talking about the 80s, mid 80s or so. Steven Spielberg and a handful of other execs, decided to do, a series called Amazing Stories. Could have been early 80s, actually, when I think about it. And I had worked for a makeup effects artist named Stan Winston, who, is famous for The Terminator, The Predator, Jurassic Park. Stan was,
cool.
He's world famous. Yeah, the late Stan Winston. God rest his soul. But he hired me on a film called Invaders from Mars. And so I worked with Stan for a little bit, and then I left and started my own company. I started doing Nightmare on Elm Street films. I started with Nightmare on Elm Street 2 and 3 and 4. I did the 3 of the films, but that was the first one. So I left Stan's to go work on that. And I would still do things like run, he got the film, he didn't do Alien, but he did the second film with Jim Cameron called Aliens. And I got to run all the face hugger skins for him. So,
cool.
So he still used me from time to time. Any kind of bleed over that he'd have, like he had to go to England, so he needed someone to run these skins because they were doing some early tests with the face huggers. So I'd stay back in my little tiny shop. I had a tiny little shop behind, a photography studio. It was literally like one small, like a single car garage.
Oh, wow.
Kind of. And so I ran all the face hugger skins out of there. But anyway, so, working with Stan, we got along really well. And again, he was recommending me. So when he got this TV show, The Amazing Stories with Steven Spielberg, and Toby Hooper directed this episode that Stan was working on. I think it was called Miss Stardust, if I remember. It was about a bunch of aliens, and Al played this sort of cabbage head man or something.
Right.
I guess it was more based on lettuce than it was cabbage. But so they did these appliances, but they had nobody to apply them. And I think at the time Stan was in the union, and then he left the union, or there was a dispute. He then since went back, but so he couldn't apply. And so he remembered me, and I had just gotten in the union on Lost Boys. I'd worked on Lost Boys with V. Neal and Greg Cannon, the two makeup artists who went on to win Academy Awards, these guys. But so I just got in the union, and Stan called me up and said, "Hey, look, this is a union gig, and I need if you're available to come and apply." And also helped them on Monster Squad, a Fred Decker film. Stan and I helped them apply this werewolf makeup. Anyway, so he called me up, and I said, "Sure," and he said, "Have you heard of, Al Yankovic?" Of course, Dr. Demento and all that stuff. And sure, he had also done, Another One Rides the Bus, I think, or that Queen parody.
Right. Yeah.
So I knew him. I remember listening to that in college, that song, those songs. And so I said, yeah, that'd be great. And I think Eat It had been out. Yeah, Eat It had already come out, I think. And so the Michael Jackson parody, based on Beat It. And so I said, yeah. So, I met with Al, and they brought the appliances on, and we did a makeup test, and it built it was a cabbage head, and then it had appliances that kind of stopped at the face. So from basically, you imagine like a cowl or a hoodie, sort of everything was covered except for his face. And I just kind of painted that out green and tried to do some highlight and shadow. And it just didn't look right. It looked like what it was, which was just, like a cowl and like a hoodie. And it didn't look like he was a part of his actual face. Suddenly it became, the Wicked Witch of the West from Wizard of Oz, green in the face, but then all these leafy things coming off of the oval of the face. So, I just suggested and talked with them about, I know this shoots in 2 days. It's shot in 2 days after that test. I said, is there any way we can quickly make some appliances that would go on the face, to kind of blend it in and help it work better? And, the guy there who worked for Stan, Shane Mahan, said, yeah, let me go back and see what I can do. So I think they stayed up all night. Like he sculpted them very quickly. And I think they had rubber molds of actual lettuce leaves that they were do clay presses into, and then take those, float them out, and then put them on the Al's life cast, his mask that they had made of replica of his face, and they blended those off and molded them, and then they quickly ran foam latex. Like I think someone stayed at the shop overnight to do it, and we did another test. I think actually no, we didn't have time to do a test. We went right into shooting, and that was the kind of a sort of fast hi meeting Al, like, hi, how are you, and then one makeup test, and then boom, we're off and running with the show. And I think I only applied it maybe 4 times. They usually shoot those things about in 8 days. So I think I remember just sitting with Al, meeting him. He's just the nicest person you ever want to meet. Very quiet, very, very private and kind of quiet, surprisingly, because you'd think that, as zany as his humor is and out there, and he really puts it out there. I mean, when he's on camera, he's just 110%. He
Yeah.
just, everything that's in him, he just, just blurts out anything that comes to his mind or whatever. But when he's just sitting in the chair or just talking, he's a very, very private guy, very shy, I felt. And I actually found myself kind of telling him jokes and keeping him laughing. I thought I would be getting like 24/7. Dana Carvey. I worked with Dana Carvey on a film called Master of Disguise, where he went through 20 different makeups I did on him. And Dana would actually do stuff like just test things out on me and everybody else in the makeup trailer. He would, try a voice like he was going to do this one voice that sounded like Al Gore. So he's like, "The planet is heating up." He would like do this kind of funny. And if we giggled loud enough, he would go, "Okay, that's a keeper," And so it was a joy with working with Dana because I found myself not being able to work very quickly because I was laughing all the time. And so anyway, with Al, Al was kind of quiet, and that's actually a better, patient, or sometimes I call them victims for me, because they sit there. I did Nightmare on Elm Street 2 with Robert Englund. I did Freddy Krueger makeup on Robert, and he just talks all the time. He's a great storyteller, and again, very funny. But he's just moving all the time. Someone comes to the trailer, he gets up out of the chair. So I learned that was like one of my first makeups to do solely by myself, and it was great training because I got to learn how to basically put makeup on a moving target. And it really taught me a lot. Now I ask actors if they can sit still for me and things like this, especially when you're laying edges around their eyes or something. But it was great training, and it helped me to wait for him to take a breath, and I'd lay that edge down really quick and then keep moving. But Al was a dream because he was very quiet and just sat in the chair. And he would say, like, tell me some others. He would want to hear stories about my experiences in the movie business. So I would tell him stuff, and I remember him laughing, and I found myself telling him more stories than he would tell me. But it was a great time, and he was just a sweetheart. And he, I've known him now. Let's see, we did that over 30 years ago, and anyway, so I've known him since then, and so that's where we first met. It was the Cabbage Man makeup. I don't know what the character actually is titled for that, but that's where we first met.
I mean, how long does it take to apply complicated makeup like Al's Cabbage Man getup?
The cabbage thing, since it had sort of like a hood slash, it had a hood. I guess it would like to be a headpiece that kind of went on and kind of tacked down. That was a lot of it, and then the rest were just blending that down and then covering up, using the cheek pieces I talked about, the lettuce cheek pieces that would blend into his nose and into the sides of his face and stuff, and his chin. And you'd spend the time blending those to make it as seamless as you could, and then those would kind of overlap, like leaves do or petals do on a rose. They would overlap themselves, so it wasn't very difficult. I'm guessing that it probably took about an hour and a half to put on, maybe an hour and a half to get it, And again, when you don't have, if you do, say, a makeup like Freddy, for 30 times, by the time you start at 3 hours. By the time you're done, it's down to an hour. After 30 days. So I didn't get that chance with Al because I think it was only a 4-day shoot for us, maybe a 4-day shoot over an 8-day period. But it was fun, And again, he was great in the makeup. A lot of actors will, they're not necessarily complain, but you can tell they're not good with makeup. They don't care for it. They'd rather avoid it if they can. And other ones like, Gary Oldman, certainly, he'll come up with ways to torture himself. I know that on when he did that film, the sequel to Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal, that he came up with, with the makeup artist, my old boss, Greg Camp, he came up with ways to pull his eye down. I mean, he's really into it. I think he would have been a makeup artist in another life, if he was an actor, because he just loved that. Like Lon Chaney did that. Lon Chaney, the original, Phantom stuff, would pull his eye down, and he would take the skin that when you boil an egg, that you peel off the egg, that kind of fine, like milky skin. He used those as contact lenses.
Yeah.
And he would take tape and tape up his face. Yeah, it was just tortured himself, but it was all about the look. He was a real true artist.
Right.
Real Renaissance man. And so so some people but Al was great. I mean, he let me do my thing, but he was definitely not a complainer, and dealt with the hours it took, and I think he really enjoyed the process. And I think, again, starting with these songs and then moving into videos, then getting these acting jobs, he loved it. So he was he was totally into it. And yeah, so I think about an hour and a half to do that makeup.
Now, Alice told a story about wearing the cabbage head costume, in that he said that there were actually 2 light bulbs next to his nose in the costume, and it would actually burn his nose when they lit up. Do you remember any of that?
Well, I don't remember that, but they could have put things on his collar, maybe, to give him. That sounds really familiar to me. That really sounds familiar. Like, I don't remember them being on his nose because there wasn't any necessarily, if you look at the pictures, a place to hide lights. But they could have, in his costume, he could have had a high collar that they buried the little, this is all before LEDs and stuff that don't put out and emit any heat. Yeah. So they could have done that, because I think that does sound familiar, like to light him up. Because everything was like that. Again, Tobe Hooper, who did Texas Chainsaw, was the director. I remember Toby going around, talking like this all the time, and he had a big cigar, and it always had a Diet Pepper and a cigar. That was the time where you could actually smoke indoors and all that stuff. So he would go around, and he loved what we did. But so they may have come up with some kind of zany ways to light. Cause I remember all the aliens were lit from below with kind of like if there was a pink alien, they'd put extra pink lights on it or something like that. So they very well could have. I don't remember the lights there. That had nothing to do with with me. That was a lighting thing. So if I don't remember that, but there could have been an instance where, I'll bet you they did a close up or something of his eyes. And they didn't. It would have been nice to have contact lenses. We didn't have those, but that would be a perfect makeup to do some kind of green lenses on. But so maybe they were trying to light his eyes up, and maybe the cabbage, just to get some light in there, and they may have put 2 things close for a close-up, and that's what he remembers burning his face. Because otherwise you'd see the lights. It wasn't a part of the makeup look. But they either were trying to light his face, or maybe they put that right up to his eyes, and and maybe that's what burnt his nose.
Wow.
I don't remember that specifically, but who knows?
You said it took about an hour and a half to put the makeup on. Would it take that same amount of time to take makeup off, or is it usually a much quicker process to remove makeup?
It's a much quicker process.
Yeah,
it's much quicker. I mean, it always seems to be, I don't know why, but about 45 minutes for a makeup, say makeup and hands. If you've got a costume, if you've got appliances like body appliances, then we're talking about it could be a couple of hours if it's like a full makeup bodysuit thing. But usually it's about 45 minutes. I don't know why, but that's always seems to be 40 to 45 minutes to take it off. And it goes off, comes off much quicker because you're not, painstakingly trying to, like when I worked on Fat, which we'll talk about in a second, but it was a little bit much more refined makeup. But there's blending that I had to do around the eyes and around the mouth and the chin and the lower lip, and then not so much around the neck because he had a costume on, but you had to be careful around the temples of his face, and that took a little bit more time. So it's always kind of refined when you're putting it on. But when you take it off, it's just get it off as fast as you can without damaging. You can actually hurt an actor. You can tear their skin, on a micro level that you can't see, but then you come in the next day to put on that damn glue. Yeah, that glue again, and it burns, and they're going, ow, the side of my face is just burning. It's because when you were too rough in taking it off. So a lot of times I've had actors, I worked on Bark at the Moon with Ozzy Osbourne. And again, this is when I was working for a makeup artist named Gerd Canham, and we went to do the Life magazine, a big Life magazine spread. And Ozzy had been in a concert all, the night before. And so he literally rolled out of bed. He ordered, I think it was, 3 double cognacs and downed them like they were blood. And he said, just to get normal, he said, okay, now I'm ready. Now to put the makeup on. And then unfortunately that, got him tipsy. And so he finally got the makeup finished and got to he was in a hotel, it was at the Beverly Wilshire. So we went to the room that we were actually going to do this photo shoot. And the photo shoot was with his new baby girl. And it wasn't the one that's popular that's in the show with him. It was his firstborn daughter. She was only 4 months old, and he was holding her, and he was nervous that she's going to wake up and see this monster holding her. And the baby wouldn't have known the difference. And so he didn't last very long. I think the photographer, which may have been Annie Leibovitz, is it? Annie Leibovitz? It may have been her, I think. But anyway, he was like, I think 2 rolls of film. Back then it was 35, per roll was like 35 shots, or whatever it was. And she was going through them really quick, but he was like, okay, that's it. That's enough. And he left. And so he got back to the room and he just tore this makeup off.
Oof.
And now we didn't have to do it the next day or anything like that, but you could tell he, kind of made his skin really red. And so by the time we got back, he was already in the shower. So we waited for him to come out. Of course, he couldn't get half of it off, and the glue was still there. We had to, we had to then work on him after he had gotten in the shower. And then again, he stopped us and said, okay, that's it. I'm done. And we weren't finished. He had a lot of glue on him still. So we just left a bottle of remover and took off. So,
wow.
So some people can be very impatient. There's other actors who get claustrophobic, all that kind of stuff. But,
oh, yeah.
And I always, we do things that we do now, like, we use steamy hot towels afterwards to kind of soothe the face. And it's the best part of the makeup removals. You get the stuff off and you kind of covered in this sort of almost like baby oil, the solvent, and it's greasy and all that stuff. And you don't just leave them, so you hot towel them and you kind of, give them moisturizers and stuff like that to help prepare that skin. So if you have to go back the next day, you can. I know Jim Carrey on the Grinch, he could only work, I think it was 3 days on and then 3 days off or something, or 2 days off or something like that to allow his skin to repair. And he was covered from head to toe, including his teeth and including his eyes with contact lens. That was a full body thing, yeah. Look, and it can be quite torturous. I mean, that was I've heard things 10 to 12 hour makeup just to put him into it.
Man.
So, yeah, and it's insane. And then I think I heard at one point that he, I don't know how much of this is true, but I did hear, and I think it's pretty much on record now that they brought in, I think, a Navy SEAL guy or somebody, I think in the military, to help him, calm himself, when claustrophobia and stuff, because it can be maddening. I've been in full body makeups with fat suits on, and it just after a while you go, okay, I was in this fox costume one time, and I had this little tiny hole. Basically the fox has got a snout on him, so my mouth and my real mouth is about 6 inches back from the fox's mouth. So I'm breathing out of this little hole. And we were on a really hot set with a fire roaring and all that stuff. Oh. And back then I was smoking. I've quit. I've been, smoke free for 20 years, but back then I was smoking and I just got I couldn't take it. I had to get the head off. I couldn't breathe, So, it can be, problematic sometimes. So you just try to make actors as comfortable as possible. I think Al on Fat was probably more uncomfortable than anything because this suit was a lot for him to,
right.
to have on and then sweat through and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. While we're talking about Fat, let's talk about Fat.
Okay.
As I said earlier, this is, such an iconic video for Al's career, such an iconic thing in concert, and it's such an amazing song and everything surrounding it. So how did you get involved with the Fat music video?
Well, knowing Al again from this show is, he liked me. And I can't remember if the movie that he did, the UHF movie, was before or after Fat. I think it was after Fat, if I remember.
Yes, it was after Fat, yeah.
Yeah, after Fat. So anyway, he called me back, because we got along really well, and it basically came from him, his suggestion. I know his manager, Jay Levy?
Yep.
I think it's Jay Levy,
yep.
I remember. And his manager was directing it, directed, I think, most of all of his videos, I think Jay did. So I met with those guys. They came over to the shop and we talked about, the concept. And of course, Al wanted the biggest, fattest guy. he wanted to be the biggest thing he could, as much weight as I could put on him. Now there's a limit only in the fact that, how do you move in something like that? And all the extras that they hired, to be in the show, there's nobody anywhere near as big as he was intentional,
right?
But they all have some weight on. In fact, a couple of them had, I think there was an Asian gentleman. I'm looking at the picture now. An Asian gentleman who had his own girth, but I can see another guy that I remember had a belly pad on. So it was a combination of some heavy set guys and then some guys that were padded. But Al just stands out as this ginormous, guy, and. It was like as big as you can make it. I'm like, I'd show him pictures, no, bigger than that. It was just like, oh my gosh. So, wow. And I don't think I've seen a fat suit maybe that big. I don't know. But, and of course, when you get that big, you've got to make hands too. You can't, a lot of times I did a fat makeup on Dana Carvey for the Master of Disguise movie. And And, he ended up just using his normal hands because it's not, and people don't really notice, and as long as it's you're not too heavy. But when you get to be 400 pounds, I'm guesstimating that Al was, again, Al's about what, he's at least 6'2", I think, maybe, I don't know, around there, maybe 6'1", I don't know, maybe he's taller than that. I just remember him being tall, and so anyway, so we had to do hands as well, and those were basically gloves. So back then, now appliances are all made out of silicone rubber. They've got a very forgiving translucency, like a translucency quality to them, like skin does. So you can see light, how you can see through an ear, a backlit ear, on someone's ears.
Right.
You can see through. Similar, and it just forgives a lot of edges and problems. But with foam latex, you had to paint everything on the surface. It couldn't be intrinsically colored, so you had to paint everything, all the veins and anything, all the breakup of the skin, you had to paint on the surface. And that makes it more difficult. And it also makes it, harder to, hide an edge, if you have an edge around the blending edge and stuff like that. So with the gloves, we decided to go with gloves instead of hand appliances because they could just slip them on and slip them off. And if you damaged them or they got dirty, we could just pull off, and I think we had 3 or 4 sets.
Oh, wow.
And I believe it was a 3-day shoot. We shot it at Culver City Studios, and it's where we shot Child's Play. So I had just, when I got the call from Al, I was in the middle of doing Child's Play, and we had already done part of the shooting in Chicago. I flew back. I, was working on the Al's the suit. And then unfortunately, I thought I was praying that we would shoot after we wrapped. But what happened was that Michael Jackson had shot, the original. What is it? What's the original? I forgot.
Bad.
There's Fat, and then there's
Bad.
Oh yeah,
Bad.
Yeah. His original album, Bad, and he had already done the video, and Scorsese shot it in New York with a real subway. So, but Michael wanted to do a children version, for kids that was, kind of, I guess, the same kind of thing. So he had the thing rebuilt at Culver City. I mean, meaning they built an exact replica of the subway in New York. So underneath, and so it just happened to be there. And I don't know, maybe that's why Al, got the idea, or maybe he fast tracked the song, or maybe he already had it. I don't know. But they were able to borrow it. They asked them if they could leave it up after they got done shooting, so they left it up for them. Made a deal with the studios to leave the set up there, and that's where we shot it. So it was actually on the same stages in the same studio where I was shooting Child's Play. So I would go, after building this. I mean, it probably took us about, I want to say maybe 4 weeks to build everything.
Wow.
Kamala Henneman, again, I had a costumer named Kamala Henneman who was excellent. She worked on, I think, Star Wars and a bunch of other things. And she came in and was able to, do some work at my shop. And then while I was shooting Child's Play, the suit itself was quite a big suit. So, I had Kamala, work at the shop. But at one point I had to leave and go on set. And so there was nobody really to open up for her. And she was able to take the suit home. So she didn't have a ton of room at her apartment. So she was still able to kind of work out of her house and finish the suit up. And she did everything from the underbody suit, which is the, basically, the fat padding look was done in a separate suit. And then there's a costume that goes over the top of that. And so she built everything from the costume, the jacket, the gauntlets for the arms and the, the go over, and I did the fat makeup out of my studio. We already had the fat makeup and the gloves finished, but it was a lot more work just to get the suit made. She did the boots and she did everything, and then all the belt buckles and all that kind of stuff. She created all that stuff. So and it was only one of them. I mean, it was normally in a film you'd make probably at least 3, so you were constantly cleaning and rotating the suits. But since it was a 3-day shoot, we were able to just get away with the one. But anyway, I would go then, and so I wanted to, of course, apply it. I wanted to be there for Al and not have to turn it over to somebody. And so I would go. It's like 6 a.m, 5:30, I think, sometimes. And they were doing, Jay was shooting, 12-hour days, and so I would go and start the makeup, 5:30, 6 o'clock, and we'd have it ready by 7:38. and then I would shoot over to the Child's Place things and do a day of Chucky. And then at my lunch hour, or if we weren't shooting, any break, I'd run down and I left the a couple of guys in charge to look it over, but I would apply it in the morning with him, and then I would leave, and these guys would just kind of watch it and make sure that it stayed on if there was any things to touch up. And then I would come back, or they would I didn't have cell phones, but I did have a cell phone back then, one of the original giant ones. I don't know anyway, but or they'd send some. They'd send one of the guys would run up and say, "Hey, you need to come take a look at this." Like one point, I told Al at the beginning, I said, "Listen, this is a lot of neck and cheek and fatness around the neck." And they said a lot of times when actors get into stuff like this, they automatically act like they have a neck brace on. It's like a human nature to kind of stiffen up and move stiff. So you'll see people in makeups and they'll turn their whole body. As opposed to turning their neck, they'll turn their whole body when they have to look at something left or right. Well, that just screams you're wearing a makeup.
Right.
So I said, listen, don't do that. Like this thing can take it. It's foam latex. No, don't worry. And he said, yeah, there's a lot of I want to go crazy with what Michael did, but when I snap my neck back, when it's fat, whatever, and he's whipping his neck around. He said, I want to go for it. I said, yeah, go for it. Don't worry about it. Well, it was sort of a mistake because maybe I should have told him maybe 50% or something. But he went nuts. I mean, if you watch that video, he's whipping his head everywhere. He didn't hold back, which it looks better that way. It really does.
Yeah.
But it just tore the neck, right? Like someone took a knife and sliced his throat open.
Oh,
so
wow.
One of the guys came and grabbed me and said, "You got to come back over here." And so I had to run back down and quickly repair it. And from then on, and I think he had done most of the head whipping part. It was done after that. So, and you don't see it on screen. It happened so quickly, so you don't really see it. And I was able to repair it and get through that day. And then the next day, I said, "Hey, can you hold back a little bit on the head, snapping, whipping around?" And so it worked out fine. But, it was great because he did what I told him, which was he'd listen to me. He'd tell an actor, "Hey, look, don't turn your head this way because it buckles or wrinkles funny." He would do that. And it's hard to do that when you're trying to act. And then you've got this note from your makeup artist saying that if you look up or turn your head a certain way, it'll give away that it's a makeup because the rubber sometimes looks like a wetsuit, and you have to kind of, some actors can, will listen and they'll take that in when they're acting, but a lot of times they don't want to let that disturb their performance. So they'll kind of ignore you and you have to kind of, deal with that all the time.
Right,
but
right.
Yeah, that was the only snafu that we had on the whole thing. There was a separate person, I can't remember who did his hair, but there was a separate person to give him his look, and back then he had, his signature glasses, and since then he's had LASIK surgery, so he still does the fat suit concerts, and I make latex masks that slip on for him. So, instead of, so his doesn't have to go through this was probably I would say it was probably more like a 2 to 2.5 hour makeup, maybe 3 to get him fully in the costume and everything before he was camera ready for the video. But when he does the other things, he's got to go backstage in the concerts and he's got to change costumes very quickly and get in and out of this fat suit. So they made another, and this, by the way, this fat suit it's all like, fiber filled, pillows, that you have in your couch. It's pretty lightweight. There's some weight to it, with the metal and the buckles and all that stuff. It's super hot. I mean, you can't avoid that. His whole head. Yeah. I mean, he's got that's his own hair there. But in the video, that's they may have put something, I guess maybe. I think that was all his hair. He had a lot of hair. So his head can breathe, meaning wasn't all completely concealed. I worked on Bill and Ted Face the Music, and I had Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter as Bill and Ted. I had them in muscle suits, very similar to Al's fat suit. And we also had bald caps on them. So that was keeping all their heat in. And we were shooting in 98 degrees of New Orleans. It was humid. Oh, it was horrible in July. So, I mean, we had to open the suits up in the back and cool them down. So it can be actually deadly if you're not careful. Someone can, die of heat stroke. So you have to be very careful. This was an air conditioned, with Al, it was an air conditioned, studio, stage, but we kept him cool. We were able to open up the suit too and keep him cool. That was the main thing. But he's dancing. I mean, he didn't hold back. This guy, Al, went, nuts with the dancing. He's actually quite good, and he, was just moving 24/7. So he was just, so every night we'd have to take that suit and we'd have to open it up and basically dry it out, put a fan in it all night to dry it out. So the next morning, it would be dry, and spray it down with something called NBach, which is this spray that kind of kills bacteria because it can build up quite quickly. I worked on a show with Nick Cage called Adaptation when I did his fat suit on him. And we did a full prosthetic on his chest and his belly and all that when he was naked, or half naked or whatever. But for the most of the film, that he wore an underbody suit that would go underneath his clothing, and that was it had little jiggly sacks of, I think we used, it was lentil beans that we used in like his chest and stuff to give him a jiggle, right? Well, and that was just pretty standard. I think Al has lentil beans in his breasts, on the thing too. But it got so hot when we were shooting with Nick Cage, and they weren't drying the suit out, and I wasn't there all the time for I was there in the days that they shot the nude one, and I'd apply that, but I kind of turned over to the makeup and wardrobe department, his underbody suit that he would wear day to day as he played these two characters. So he's in almost every shot. And I know we had at least 2, maybe 3 suits, but they weren't drying them out. Well, what happened was one time we're putting the suit on, and I was there that day, and I see this little green thing coming out of the suit. I'm like, what is that? And it was a little lentil bean sprout. So these beans had gotten so moist, and they're in a dark, moist, like underground, basically, oil. And they had sweat, and they had some kind of weird, I guess, minerals to live off of, and they sprouted. And it was so we opened it up, and all of the beans had sprouted. Just a couple of them made it. We only knew it. We only knew about it because a couple of the leaves had actually come through the through the fabric, through the spandex, yeah. So you have to be careful of that. We don't use lentil beans anymore. That was the last time I used them. But I know Al has them. I think Al has them, in his chest, I think. And again, it was just a quick way to make, they were heavy, and they would jiggle and then kind of move around. Since then, we go to plastic and different things, the heavy-weighted plastic and stuff like that. So we have to do that. And another trick now that we did on Face the Music is once we got done, we only had, again, there was a low budget on Face the Music, so we ended up only being able to make, one set of muscle suits. And so we'd go from, Alex and Keanu to then they do the reverse shot where they were themselves, and then we would shoot over 2 doubles in the muscle suits back onto the real guys, and then we pop back and forth. Okay. So I had to clean the suits every night. I had to sterilize them so that these actors, doubles that would get in these suits wouldn't go, why is this suit wet and gross? So a trick is that you use vodka. We'd go out and get very cheap, like gallons of vodka, and cheap stuff, and $10 a gallon or something, and we'd pour them into a tub, and then we just physically soak the entire suit in vodka and then squeeze it out, and being alcohol, basically, grain alcohol, but almost pure alcohol, they would dry out very quickly, and then also sterilize, and leaving absolutely no smell. It's pretty amazing. So that's a trick. And it was with Al's, I didn't think I knew that trick at the time, so we'd have to just stick a blower into it. Plus, it was himself getting to the suit over and over.
Right.
So I'm sure the crotch was probably a little damp. But he didn't mind. He was having a blast. And I guess the heat was. I don't know if he spoke to you guys about the heat, but the heat can be, quite intense. And it was good that we didn't completely cover up his head; that his head could breathe. Yeah. And let out. I think you retain. You release like 80% of your body heat goes out through the top of your head. So having that, able to breathe was a big thing. And then we had these 3 gloves that we'd switch out if they get dirty. And then you take the ones. I had a small crew, just 2 guys. And then Kamala was there too, and to be able to kind of clean things and prep them. And again, it was only a 3-day shoot, but it was fun. And I was literally like running. I mean, when I say back and forth, I'd get out the door of the Chucky stage and I would run. It was about 300 yards.
Wow.
So 3 football fields, and I would run because they were literally at the opposite end of the studio. It wasn't like right next door. It was like, so I'd have to run like 3 football fields down and jump in and huffing and puffing, check on the makeup, and then run back and forth. The guys I had could cover for emergencies, but when the neck tore, that was something they just kind of thought,
Wow.
we don't want to be responsible.
Right.
So they called for me. I had to run down to set. Anyway.
I've seen this picture floating around of the fat suit with Chucky's head on it.
Oh yeah. Well, again, they were being done simultaneously, and I don't know. I don't think it was my idea to do that. I think I came back and somebody took one of the mechanical heads, and we had Al's suit, on a stand, to kind of prop it up. I think it was after the shoot. Yeah, I think it was after we were done with it. And we had to prop it up on now it's hanging on my wall. Let me send you a picture of that too. But it's hanging on the wall, kind of like leaning out, kind of now. But it was on a stand at the time, and so someone we didn't have it. I have Al's head in the makeup now on my wall, but back then there was no head on it. So someone just took the mechanical head and Chucky.
Oh.
And I think I posted it on Instagram, and it kind of went viral.
Yeah.
People love that. I think I sent it to Al too, so he may have posted it as well. But it's great because Chucky's only his head's maybe the size of a large cantaloupe or something, and then you've got this giant, huge body, with his ginormous gut, so it makes for a funny picture. Then people want to know what's the story behind that. Well, that's just because they were running simultaneously the two shows. I've had to do that a couple of times. I've had one time I had 5 shows at one time. I swore I'd never do that again. It just stresses you out too much. This is enough stress, And I was in my 20s, so I could do this. I could do this 300 yards back and forth, with not too much trouble. Now I'd keel over and die of a heart attack.
I want to go back to a couple of things you said. I was going to ask you if you knew where the fat suit was, and it sounds like you actually do know where that fat suit is.
I have it.
All right, we need to stop the interview right there. But be sure to tune in next week for the bone-chilling conclusion.
A huge thank you to Kevin Yagher. Be sure to check out his awesome website with all these really cool pictures over at kevinyagher.com. We can't wait for you to hear the rest of the interview on next week's episode.
Today's episode is brought to you by Joe and Yvonne from Waiting for Lunch Radio. Waiting for Lunch Radio is a free-form radio show inspired by mixtapes and zines, playing a wide range of crazy music and hot, fresh, demented ear food. Waiting for Lunch Radio is not available where you get your podcast because it's on Mixcloud. But don't worry, you can also find it at waitingforlunch.com.
Tummy grumbling for some delicious programming? Waitingforlunch.com will cure your pangs. Just follow the aroma of freshly baked and curated audio bites with a side of musical adventures and mashed potatoes. Potatoes. Your hosts Joe and Yvonne love potatoes. Leave a request, demand, or your best hangry impression at 313-883-9275. Order ahead at waitingforlunch.com, a radio zine that's a treat and something for your brain to eat.
This week's episode is brought to you in part by Discover Darwin, promoting tourism in Darwin, Minnesota. Not only is historic Darwin, Minnesota beautiful, it's also Western.
Last week we talked all about Country Saloon in Darwin, Minnesota.
We did?
Yeah, don't you remember?
I remember trying to talk to you about it, and you just kept talking over me with your perennial bang nonsense.
Well, I don't know about that, but Dave, you really did a poor job of explaining all the ins and outs of Country Saloon.
Well, Mr. Expert, be my guest.
Okay, I will. Wait, Kevin Yagher was our guest.
No, you know what I mean.
Oh, anyway, so I was researching Country Saloon, and one website called it Bob's Country Saloon.
Is that the official name?
I have no idea.
All right, what else did you learn, Ethan?
Well, I learned that it either has never actually existed or it's closed for good, because when I called the number, it was disconnected.
So visit Darwin, Minnesota on your next expedition. Discover Darwin, more than just a twine ball. And after you visit Darwin, Minnesota, be sure to visit discoverdarwin.biz.
Each week, we're able to bring you our podcast absolutely free thanks to our sponsors Burrito, Discover Darwin, Jackson Scoggins, David Grant at wolfandwool.com, and our newest sponsor, Joe and Yvonne from Waiting for Lunch Radio.
And thanks to our amazing close personal friend Patreon supporters UH Jeff, Zeb, Allison, Blair, Frank from the Bank, Kenneth, Jared, Jake, and Javier. And thanks to Stan and everyone else in our pretty stinking majestic Patreon family.
If you enjoy our family-friendly weekly Weird Al podcast, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/2000inch or by picking up some pretty stinking majestic Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast merchandise, such as t-shirts, tote bags, tank tops, and more by heading to shop.2000inch.com.
And remember, right now, Patreon supporters can check out the first 2 episodes of the Black and White and Weird All Over bonus episode series, our special book series where we sit down with author John Bermuda Schwartz and we go page by page, picture by picture, centimeter by centimeter through his book, Black and White and Weird All Over. Patreon supporters get to hear all bonus episodes early. Everyone else, stay tuned. Frank said he would post them outside of Patreon once he finishes playing Weird Al-opoly.
We also want to give an extra special big thank you to our Patreon family this week, because not only did we reach our first stretch goal last month, we also blew right past our second stretch goal as well. That means that we did not one, but 2 raffles for our June Patreon supporters.
If you are a Patreon supporter at the $5 tier or above, you are automatically entered into both raffles. All right, let's see who won last month's raffles. Drum roll, please, Bermuda!
Thanks, Bermuda! The June 2021 winners are Crazy Ken and Joe Jaffa! Congratulations, Kenneth and Joe! You win some very cool handmade buttons from our friend over at Bootleg Buttons, plus a digital download of Misbehavin' 1989 by Amy Lee and Baby Billy because, well, we had extras and why not?
We'll put up a 3rd stretch goal soon, so if you want to help us reach that stretch goal and get in on this month's raffles and all the other pretty stinking majestic perks that come along with being in our Patreon family, be sure to join over at patreon.com/2000inch.
We love hearing from our listeners and, of course, other Weird Al fans. So join our Facebook community and post about Weird Al by visiting group.2000inch.com. And we also love it when we receive voicemail via our official 27-hour-a-day podcast hotline, 347 Spatula. You might even hear your official message on the show.
For everything about our podcast, including incredible past episodes and guests, be sure to visit WeirdOutPodcast.com or 2000inch.com and keep up on new episodes, podcast news, and events by following at 2000inch on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And thank you for subscribing and leaving reviews on Apple Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Spotify, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast app.
Thank you once again to our guest, Kevin Yagher. Also thanks to Jake Larson, John Bermuda Schwartz, UH Jeff Nucera, Maya the Cat, Mike Minnick, Helen Ketchum, and Architect Amy. Thank you to the Grammy Award-winning Jim Kimo West for our incredible theme song, and thank you to Weird Al Yankovic, as this podcast probably would not exist without him. And a big thanks to all of you, our listeners, subscribers, Patreon supporters, and sponsors, and everyone else who makes our podcast possible.
Be sure to tune in for part 2 of our interview with Kevin Yagher next week on episode 115inch. And as always, thank you for listening to Dave and Ethan's 2000inch Weird Al podcast. And remember to gill and chill.
All right, well, Dave, so you know how Weird Al played Cabbage Man in the Miss Stardust episode of Amazing Stories? Well, I was thinking, since he's got experience with it, what other sorts of extraterrestrials could Al play?
Yoda?
No, that's too obvious.
Chewbacca?
Nah, he's too tall for Al. I mean, Al's tall, but that's just another level.
Alf?
No. Alf's too short for Al.
Oh, the Yip Yips from Sesame Street.
Nah, that's just too on point,
E.T.?
Well, episode 41-inch guest Mike Duquette would love that, but I don't know.
Marvin the Martian.
Nah, that's too villainous. I mean, Al already played Hitler, and it's kind of gauche at this point.
Jar Jar Binks?
Heck no! That was Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast, episode 114-inch.
Podcast that slashes up Dasher, just like Freddy Krueger.
I think Al has lentil beans in his breasts. The crotch is probably a little damp.